How did the people who would become Israelis kick the British Empire out of Palestine? I think that the point of this question is to say terrorism. Aha, so Palestinian terrorism is justified. But there's a problem, because if the Palestinians take the Israeli example of 1946, the bombing of the King David Hotel, or the various attacks on railways and British police, they would have had a radically different 30 years of terrorism. It would have been a completely different campaign, and incidentally, it probably would have been a much more successful one for Palestinians. How did the Jews get rid of the British in 1948? The first answer is they didn't. The British Empire lost India, and once it lost India, it didn't really need Egypt and Palestine, which were kind of buffers around the Suez Canal, and it was expensive. After the war, Britain didn't have the money. Attlee was trying to build out in Britain a new social welfare state. All of those British reasons pulled Britain out. Historians think that Jewish attacks on British imperial rule contributed, made it faster. And yes, the militias of the Jews in Palestine started bombing massively, disrupting everything they could find of the British. But here's the thing. They targeted the military. The King David Hotel is the most famous target. The 80 civilians, I think, were killed in that bombing. It was a massive bombing of the entire south wing of the hotel. The south wing of the hotel was the military headquarters for the entirety of Palestine and Transjordan for all forces of the British Empire. The bottom basement floor was the CID, the intelligence division, which counts as the part of the civilian death toll, but it's the Imperial Intelligence Department. By the way, 17 Jews died in that attack, something like 40 Arabs. Menachem Begin almost had a nervous breakdown when he found out the death toll. Civilians died in that bombing, but the target was military. That was what the Jews did to the British. What have Palestinians done? If Palestinian terrorism was limited to the Israeli military, it wouldn't have been terrorism. That's not what terrorism is. That's just war. And when Israelis believed, large numbers of Israelis, enough to win elections, that what they wanted from Israel was a withdrawal from an area they needed to have a state, to have independence, to end the Israeli military rule. When Israelis believed that, it rebuilt an Israeli left that went to the peace process of the 1990s. The great tragedy on the Palestinian side is that they did not do what the Jews did on the British. The great tragedy was at the height of the peace process in the fall of 2000, turned into a massive wave of 140 suicide bombings targeting children, targeting buses, targeting pizzerias in Israeli cities. They came for the people, and not in Judea and Samaria or the West Bank or Gaza. Imagine 140 bombings in your country on any issue, no matter what the injustice. But what Hamas always said when it was blowing up those bombings was that this isn't about independence or two states or any kind of cooperation, any kind of reconciliation. Israel never demanded the destruction of Britain. If it had, it wouldn't have worked. I happen to think that the West Bank is part of the Jewish homeland, but I also happen to think that we can compromise because another people needs a place to live. But they kept coming for my family. They kept coming for my people. I have an incredibly simple definition of terrorist: targeting civilians for political ends. That's it.